Today's session 2 is continuation of session 1, environment and economics and social science together, and experts recommended overall. Our two-day event is dedicated to net zero renovation, and we know that financial barriers and economical barriers are the most complicated to overcome. Today we will discuss how to handle them. Fortunately, we are not at the first stage. Mechanism and instruments are being tested, in particular in the European Union. Do no significant harm principle, environment assessment. We think that we should build back better than it was before. Environmental organization understands that one of the principles they have developed was green economy, green investments, where most donors and partners understand and help Ukraine to move towards recovery and sustainable development. Many donors help now. The government doesn't have time to think about environment and nature. International partners and donors help us. A special mechanism, Ukraine facility, had been created, which had written down requirements for Ukraine to follow. Today we will be talking what is happening in Ukraine, the EU experience to follow, and we will talk about our power sector, about small and medium business, and our communities. Our first speaker is Andriy Kitura, Development Director, DiXi Group, Green Transition Office under the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. He will tell us about strategic green transition priorities. I have prepared some slides I want to share. Today's topic is about matching priorities and projects. I will be talking about practical tools, what we are doing and plan to do. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to listen to all yesterday's sessions, but they were about documents, priorities, policies, and Ukraine's path towards net zero. But action plan is crucial. In Ukraine, there are several tools. I will be talking about energy and climate. There are 140 policies. One policy means one reform in one sector or one law or any plan of the government. All these policies are being transformed into KPIs to follow progress at the level of the government in order to avoid the situation when we have announced the policy and we didn't manage to do something on time. Unfortunately, there were such cases, and we have digital indexes. For example, the share of renewable energy. In order to attain these purposes, we have to implement specific investment projects. For example, 2030 carbon neutrality purpose means that we have to do this and that step by step. This plan consists of specific measurable steps. We should build something, change something, modernize something, and here we see real problems. It is not complicated to draft a good strategy, but it is complicated to find people who will take this risk, who will take responsibility, who will organize people. We need managerial skills, we need people, and we need funds. And there is a lack of funds. Private sector and international partners will be very important for us. Another problem is there are no projects. So many ideas, so many projects, where to take money from. We can
the delegation from the government, from ministries, and the 9 enterprises will present their own projects that Sweden side is interested in, and we will continue to do it. So we have already launched the tool, which will help one find another. It is a green platform and supported by the Ministry of Economy and Agriculture. And I would like to represent it. Thank you. Yes, I'm hasty because I would like to respect timeline. So there is the green platform. It's quite easy to find it in the internet. You can just insert green platform, Zelena platforma, and you will find it. So this is the homepage of this platform, and I will present it. Its goals. So this platform contains 96 programs, financial programs, with the green criteria aimed at decarbonization, energy efficiency, lower of gas emissions, and other measures. So the government wants this platform not to be the only one, but one of the information sources where all information about such projects will be presented for the whole stakeholders. That may simplify the work of different donors that issue some grant programs, and they come to the government and they say, let's share some information, let's organize some event. Yes, we can do it. So please, there is an official catalog, everyone knows about it, so let's include this information in this catalog as well. But community, small or medium enterprise, it doesn't matter. For example, there is a need in some specific grant or credit for some project. So here the green platform, you can find any programs. There are some small questionnaires with some quick questions, and then the system will propose you relevant programs. So please test this program. We launched this program at the URC in July 2025, and frankly speaking, there are some bugs. We check it, and we will be very grateful if you find them, and we will be great to correct so it could be comfortable for everyone. You can find the description of any programs with the criteria, requirements, and there is sometimes there is additional information, links to the first source, to the original source, and every program was approved by its donor. So a little bit statistics. So a week ago, there were 93 programs. Yesterday, there were 96 programs, but I couldn't make changes. So there are a lot of programs of the Ukrainian banks. So sometimes these are different donors by IFI, AB, EBRD. They're working directly with bigger clients. But as for local communities are asked to come to these banks, Ukrgaz Bank, Ukrexim Bank, Ukrlviv Bank, and there are a lot of other banks. So there is a big portion of programs, 30%. There are programs for SME and for state-owned companies, for community sectors, and for communities and for communal sectors. What are we going to do? So this platform will be supported and we will gather additional programs. It covers all sources. There are some exotics, and we hope that we can include it in the future. And some investment funds ask us, private investment funds, maybe sometimes small, they heard about ours and they're ready to invest $3-5 million, and they are interested if they can share the information. So we will do it. We will improve the functionality of this platform, and we are at the negotiations process with the potential donors to make it more detailed. One of our plans for our next steps is to ground this platform to make it comfortable for SME or some local communities. There are offices made in Ukraine. I don't remember the total number, but over 50, that's for sure. But the idea is the small businessman or representative of a local community may come to this office, and somebody is to provide them with some initial information and on to demonstrate this online instrument. So please use it. We calculate the CO2 footprint. It's one of the tasks of the government in the strategy for SME development. And it is ready, but it's not published online, not yet. You can calculate the CO2 footprint. That's what you need to apply for any green program. It's needed for the corporate reporting or any other reports. So scope 3 is very difficult to be calculated. So we will develop this calculator as well, and we will ensure the work of other tools like private cap office. We will have the opportunity to have this analytics to realize the traffic, to get feedbacks from providers. It's very difficult to solve any problem if we have no data. So this information is needed in order to make sure that our cooperation better. And to make our cooperation with the government and donors and businessmen. So we have started a series of workshops for banks, and unfortunately, fortunately, our Ukrainian banks are mediators. The government or IMF don't go to any local community. That is impossible. But we have quite potential and resilient thanks to a different reforms banking system, and it can be a link between the stakeholders. So we share our information among banks, and we ask them to share the information about their platforms, and there are a lot of banks that want to get involved, but we are running out, but we will do it. Well, as in fact, this platform was developed by the team dedicated to the CO2 emissions decarbonizations. It is a common work of our team from DiXi Group and the Vladlena Foundation. So this is the end of my presentations. I will be very glad to answer any questions. Well, it's not ideal instrument. If you get to the platform, it doesn't mean that you will receive finance or grants. So it's a kind of catalog where you can choose a lot of programs. You can apply for any donors. You can understand better their requirements. So in this year or at the beginning of the next year, we will generalize some documents in order to make conclusions from our experience. There are some stakeholders, local communities, and SME, because they have more challenges. So, and we will try we'll try to make everything better, to explain to them how to use our catalog. So thank you very much. So if any questions from the audience or from speakers. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm a representative of the Regional Economic Support Business Fund. Mr. Scherbakov, I have a question. 2 days ago, we presented a prototype of Project Navigator for the demand of local communities, so they could analyze their own requirements, proposals online. So if we can cooperate with the Green Transition Office in respect of sharing information, so that local communities could do analysis of their projects and do it for them more comfortable and easily. I think so. It's one of our tasks. So let's let's keep in touch. I will ask my colleagues to connect you, and I think that we can find a comfortable way of cooperation. There were contacts on the slides. I don't know if everyone could see them, but I will send my contacts to the organizers of this event, and I hope that we will continue our communication, and I think that it would be comfortable. So maybe you will give a couple of words about how, if it was very easy to gather this information. As far as I understand, at the platform there must be one section regarding these standards. And what are challenges in this regard? Yes, that was difficult. We started in March, and in July we had basic functions, and there were 60 programs, I believe. The IT part was the easiest one. We can do it. I mean, Ukrainians in general, and collecting information from our partners, that was difficult, especially at the beginning, because they don't understand why, what for. And I can say that some donors don't want to share information about their programs. There were different reasons. I think that is nonsense, but they don't want somebody find them. They want to do it by themselves. They want to work in this region which is comfortable for them. And unfortunately, we are not in the position to force them. We can just ask what we are doing, in fact. And some other donors said that we have all information at our websites, and local community in Zhytomyr region, for example, don't know about your website, and they will not know about it if you don't share your information. So this platform is for free for you. So after several rounds of negotiations, most donors cooperated with that. Well, not all their programs are valid, and they are not purposed for such cooperation. But we continue this dialogue, and I hope that we will have more donors, because we don't have goals to commercialize this this goal. This is just ordinary public service, just for the sake of all stakeholders. Yes, I think that is like a good informative tool. And I have another question about how Green Transition Office, how does it work with the Ministry of Economy to promote green recovery? What is the status of draft law? Where are we going? As for the green recovery, draft law was developed by the UNDP. We didn't take part in it. We shared we shared our comments, and right now we continue our dialogue with them. As far as I know, the draft law is in the plan to be submitted through members of the parliament, but not through the government. When it will take place, we don't know. It's better to ask the authors of this draft law. It's very difficult to comment this, but if we will talk in a broader view, so we have enough resources, but they are limited. We are working on the national energy plan, national green taxonomy, and we are working on the standards, on the implementation of new standards in Ukraine, and I hope we will continue this successful work. Each of these programs aim at green recovery. I don't want to overestimate our role and value, but we started to work without any official status at the end of the 2023. But a year ago, we got the status. when we started, the Minister of Economy never defended to do something in terms of green recovery, climate change. They were our antagonist, and you can see and you can hear the rhetoric of the Ministry of Economy or the government. Of course, this is the result of influence of a lot of partners. So what are we going to do? We are trying to introduce green recovery standards in every policy. So we can do it, and we do it. We are constantly doing it, and it's working. So I see how the rhetoric is changing. So and we explain it to the government or to the Minister of Economy. Green transition is not a charitable activity. It is a business case. It's a profitable. It's pragmatic. To invest in green technologies, it's better than to invest in something other things. Green transition is interesting not just because we are investing it, because it's a profitable in long-term perspective. So it's working right now because the resources are limited. So that's what we are trying to work on. As for the draft law, it is very important. And when we talk about it, it is aimed at green taxonomy of the EU. And I hope that this draft law will be adopted, and we are ready. And we continue to work on the bylaws, and we are planning to elaborate resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers in terms of the climate change. I know that there are a lot of changes, but the criteria will remain. That's what we would like to do in Ukraine, correctly, quickly, and profitable for everyone. So I propose to give the floor to the Olena Nykyforuk. To talk about banks, which programs they have, and how they may contribute to the climate component. So, Elena, please, you're very welcome. Where is your presentation? We can hear you right now. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for your attention. In fact, we are welcoming that the Green Transition Office is situated in Ukraine, and it's cool, and it's that they are working on. It's good that they can provide stakeholders with programs supported by donors.
We have conducted with the Bankwatch Network and Global Green Grants Fund a survey about agriculture's how international financial organization might favor green initiatives of Ukrainian agriculture. First of all, my slides are not moving. May somebody help to change the slides of the presentation? If we consider theoretical moments, there are UN principles supporting subsidies of green economy, waste processing, organic green agriculture, supporting development of respective legislation, and introducing additional taxes to the most harmful enterprise. If we can't stop the activity, they should pay higher taxes in order to compensate the environmental losses, to invest into nature. By 2030, the developing markets have opportunities, and in Ukraine the amount is 73 billion, and for stable funding, the United Nations have developed principles for responsible banking, and there are also European regulations such as the EU taxonomy regulation and the corporate sustainability reporting directive. They are key drivers in this process, and they define accurate criteria for defining the sustainable types of economic activity. It is crucial for Ukraine, for restoration, for renovation on the basis of sustainable development. According to the activization of climate policy of the EU under the Green Deal, European climate law, principles of financial initiative regarding responsible banking service, UNEP FI principles for stable assurance, and EU taxonomy regulation, and other directives and policies. If we see the architecture of financial mechanism of recovery of infrastructure in Ukraine, bilateral assistance and the assistance of international infrastructure organization, restoration funds, and funds of international financial organizations play a crucial role here. But we don't forget about our own funds and specific private institutions of our business. Moreover, there is opportunity for contribution of reparations, the frozen cost and confiscated property of the Russia. If we are talking about international financial organizations and institutions in Ukraine, they are the EBRD, the World Bank, the IFC, the IBRD, the EIB, and also bilateral donors, funds, and agency of development such as GIZ, Germany, Swedfund, Sweden, British International Investment, AFD from France, and the specialized climate mechanisms. The share of funding green projects by the German Bank of Development was 67% in 2023. If we have statistical data today, how financial organizations do cooperate in Ukraine, and we can see the dynamic of disbursement. Here we can see that since 22, the assistance becomes more considerable. 2022, 2023, International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, European Investment Bank. But if we separate just green projects, it is almost impossible. We have to study each project and go deep dive whether there is a green component or not. Nowadays, we don't have such statistics. Here we can see the contribution of each financial institution into Ukraine's economy. If we see the breakdown into sectors, statistics 2024, 22% goes to transport and agriculture, 21% to state governance, 18% to power, electricity and gas, and 16% to healthcare and social assistance. Other sectors such as construction, water supply, agriculture, financial, insurance activity, and education don't have big shares. If we presentation is not moving, sorry. Please help to launch a presentation from here. You can see the structure of financing by main creditors. If we see who is the recipient in Ukraine, this statistics is collected by the Ministry of Finance, and we can see who is financially responsible, who is the main recipient. Money is given as grants and credits. I wanted to tell you about the World Bank Group. It is a considerable creditor in Ukraine and has a considerable investment profile, 22 projects, 16 investment projects, and the total amount of 14 million USD. If we consider agriculture, there are 3 agreements out of 31 projects, and 2 grants in agriculture. The problem is that we don't see which projects are green projects. If we sum up all the challenges and recommendations of the green projects in Ukraine, despite the effectiveness and economic impact of such program, we see some problems. The regions near the front line don't have so much access. There are delays because the procedure of approval is complicated. There is a lack of mutual trust. And sometimes international financial organizations don't see the ones who really need such assistance. Some sectors need more investments and also problems with informational support. These recommendations, we will distribute them. I'm wrapping up. First of all, it is necessary to accelerate defining environmental standards, key principles of the World Bank in the protection of the environment. Also, thanks to the Green Transition Office, we have created proposals. It is necessary to create the register of green projects for facilitating the analysis, not just for those who need such funding, but also if we have a pool of green projects, we might create a website where it will be able to search for such needs in Ukraine. We should also stimulate green educational programs in Ukraine following European environmental standards. Just a few people are conscious what green and sustainable means. We need outreach programs and educational programs. We should prioritize green funding and restore Ukraine on a new sustainable development and the green basis. Any quick question or we will proceed? Pippa Gallop, I will introduce you. Pippa is energy expert at Bankwatch. She has more than 20 years of experience of monitoring different projects and implementing EU standards in different countries, including Balkan countries.
Thanks, Vlada. You can see my screen okay, or? Okay, great. Thank you for the invitation. I will be speaking about the do no significant harm principle, which is a tool which has started to be used in the European Union in the last few years. And the previous speakers were indeed mentioning the importance of green investments. But one of the issues is that actually there are all kinds of opinions on what is a green investment. And the EU has started to try to resolve this question. First of all, it was already mentioned that the EU has this thing called the taxonomy regulation, which was adopted in 2020, and it aims at providing common criteria on how to define what kind of investments are sustainable. And the theory behind it is that in order to be considered sustainable, any certain project needs to make a substantial contribution to one of the 6 environmental objectives. And at the same time, it has to avoid doing any significant harm to the other environmental objectives. And those objectives are climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, sustainable use of water and marine resources, circular economy. Yes. Yeah. Really? Oh, I moved it, but it seems it's not. Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing the second one, and I switched it quite some time ago, so even if there was a delay, I would expect it to show now. So you still don't see it? Okay, okay. Yeah, I see still the first slide in this window on Zoom that says conference 2. I see still the first slide. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So yeah, as I started to say, there are 6 environmental objectives in the taxonomy regulation: climate mitigation, climate adaptation, water and marine resources, circular economy, pollution prevention and control, and protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. And so the idea is that any investment which is sustainable should contribute significantly to one of those objectives and not harm any of the others at the same time. So for example, if you build a wind farm, for example, that is definitely making a significant contribution to climate change mitigation. But if it's built in the wrong place, if it's not adequately assessed how to avoid, for example, bird migration routes or bat habitats or whatever, it can do harm to biodiversity. So the idea is that each of these projects, while trying to solve one problem, doesn't make problems in another area. So I think the framework is very good. The concept makes a lot of sense. We don't agree actually with all of the criteria which the EU came up with, but still it was an attempt to really unify the interpretation of what is a green investment and not to have every company claiming that their investment is green, and in the end everybody is so confused that they don't know what is green and what is not. So we can go to the next slide. I still see the first one at the moment. Yes, there we are. Okay. So the DNSH assessment, do no significant harm assessment, actually started only to be used for screening in EU funds in 2021. So it's actually quite a new instrument, and as we will see, it's still in the beginning. It still needs some improvement. But I just wanted to, I won't spend long on this slide, but I just wanted to point out what is the difference with the environmental impact assessment, because I've heard different people saying, okay, now this DNSH assessment has come up. Well, if we have environmental impact assessment, that is already proving that the project does no harm. But the information from the environmental impact assessment can be useful for the DNSH assessment, but I just want to underline that these are completely different processes with a completely different purpose. So they definitely shouldn't be mixed together in one process. The point of DNSH is specifically for EU funds. It's supposed to be a relatively quick screening instrument that would prevent the EU funds from financing harmful investments. Whereas the EIA is completely different. It's a much more in-depth assessment, and it's basically saying, from the legal point of view, can this project be allowed to go ahead at all under the national legislation? If so, how, what are those impacts? How can we manage them? How can we reduce them? So the DNSH is really supposed to be just for EU funds and really like a quicker screening instrument, not to be like replacing the environmental impact assessment and not serving the same purpose as an environmental assessment. And also it's worth mentioning that the DNSH also is really only at the moment for EU funds. For the loans from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, for example, or for the European Investment Bank, they have their own standards, and they also have their own way of defining which are the green investments. So this DNSH is really something quite specific for EU funds. So we can go to the next slide. Yeah, as I said, it started to be applied in 2021, but actually it is kind of something which is just starting to be rolled out across the EU funds. It's not something where there was a directive and all of a sudden it has to be applied to everything. It's kind of being introduced gradually, and so it is like for the recovery funds in the EU, it does apply, and cohesion funds and so on. But for some of the other funds, it's not applied yet properly because there is no guidance. And so far, each of the funds had their own guidance, so it's applied in different ways. For example, with the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the guidance was more stringent than for the cohesion policy. So it's been a little bit chaotic so far, to be honest. And now we are in the phase when the EU is trying to come with a more consolidated approach. So we can go to the next slide. So just to explain, as with the example of the reform and, sorry, not the Reform and Growth Facility, that's the Western Balkans, Recovery and Resilience Facility. Just to explain a bit how it worked. So it was up to the member states to do this DNSH assessment. The Commission provided guidance, and this was giving instructions on certain sectors of how to do this assessment. And then if this whole instrument was a mixture of some things which were really investments and some things which were more reforms. So if there was an investment which was, or a reform which was completely supporting an environmental objective, or it was really clear that there would be definitely no negative environmental impacts, then there could be a simplified assessment. But for the other investments, there had to be the full assessment. And then if they didn't if the member states wanted to go ahead with financing, they had to provide evidence to the European Commission that the principle had been applied, and the Commission could say, no, okay, we are not satisfied, we're going to suspend the payment until more evidence has been provided. So in fact, we were not extremely satisfied how this went, but still this was better than for some of the other funds. Let's go to the next slide. One of the problems which we identified is that, first of all, there was for some funds a lack of guidance, like for the Modernization Fund and for the Reform and Growth Facility for the Western Balkans. The do no significant harm principle is mentioned as in the legislation as being needed for these investments, but the Commission didn't issue specific guidance on how to undertake this. So in practice, for the Modernization Fund, it's quite unclear how it's being done, and for the Reform and Growth Facility, it basically was just not done at all. And even in those funds where there was guidance, we saw that the assessments were not really carried out independently. They were often done just by the project promoter, just saying that, yeah, our investment is of course sustainable and does no significant harm. So there was in some cases not really kind of independent checks and not really properly and objectively assessing the situation. A big problem from our point of view was that there was quite a lack of public access to these assessments, and there was no public consultations on them. And although this is supposed to be a quick kind of screening tool, still, if there is no kind of public consultation or access to those assessments, it's really hard to ensure that they're done objectively. So this is something which is also left very unclear because there was no directive or regulation stipulating exactly how these assessments should be done. This is kind of left in the air to the discretion of the member states. And of course, when they're in a hurry, they don't choose to do consultation. If the national authorities did their job, sometimes it worked okay, that they started to really try to make sure these assessments were at least objective. But especially in the recovery funds where the whole facility was done in quite a hurry, often they didn't really do this. And yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, for some of the sectors, like for bioenergy, our opinion is that the taxonomy criteria themselves on what investments are doing harm and what are not, we think they are too weak. So even if the principle was applied very diligently by the national authorities, there is a problem in the first place with some of the criteria, and those need to be actually revised and updated on the EU level. So next slide. The good news is that the next EU budget is looking more likely to have a consistent approach. The European Commission is working on a unified methodology for the do no significant harm principle, and that would apply to all the EU funds. And it would of course allow very simplified assessment for the sectors where we're really sure that no harm would be done. But there is a discussion about introducing an exclusion list for the sectors which are always harmful. And this is something that we really support because there is no point to waste time doing an assessment of something like a waste incinerator or a gas power plant, for example, is in any case, many of the EU funds could not fund such an investment. But just as an example, there is no point to waste time doing an in-depth assessment, and then anyway, in the end, those projects are always in some way harmful. So it would be much easier for everybody if the EU will just say, this is the list of projects we are not even considering. You don't even spend your time on this. And then they have, for the sectors which might be eligible, they have more consistent guidance sector by sector. So this is the approach that they're working on at the moment. I'm afraid that the exclusion list will be politically very difficult to agree on. But I honestly think it's in everybody's interest just to have this clarity at the beginning, just to not to have the discussion about every single project from these sectors, but we will see if that will pass. Of course, there is a danger because the EU is a very big body with a lot of different member states. It's very hard to agree on things, and if the Commission allows many exemptions, then this approach will not work well. And one of the issues, of course, that still needs to be really worked out is how to make this balance between having the assessments done properly, how to have them publicly consulted, but also to kind of keep this concept as a relatively kind of quick tool. So to conclude, I wanted to kind of give a conclusion for, okay, in this situation, what should Ukraine expect actually? And at this moment, it's quite a difficult moment to do that, just because the situation is moving also on the EU level. So I think the only thing I can say for now is really that it would be important to keep up with the events on the EU level, to watch the new guidance which is being developed for the new budget. And at the moment, I mean, the only thing which is really there and which is really applying to all investments is the taxonomy regulation and those criteria which are from the delegated acts for each sector. Those are not done in a way that they are like, this is not exactly the same as the EU DNSH assessment, but this is something which is at least existing. It's in the legislation, and those criteria are for now kind of stable and agreed on. And on the other hand, I would say that in order to make sure that investments are really avoiding harm as much as possible, it's also needed to rely on the other existing instruments like the environmental impact assessment process, and also to really introduce the appropriate assessment process under the Habitats Directive and the assessment for harm to water bodies under the Water Framework Directive. Obviously, that's quite difficult for a country which is fighting for its existence, and this is obviously subject to discussion about how to do it, to which projects to apply, and which timeline. But I think it doesn't usually work if we try to just kind of do something by half, especially at this moment, which is crucial for Ukraine's reconstruction, when there's going to be a lot of investments coming in, and it's really important to ensure right from the beginning that they're the right ones, because they will be in place for 20, 30 or 40 years. So it's really important to get it right in the first place. Thanks very much.
Let's proceed because we have two more speakers. Kateryna Melnyk, National Coordinator, Center for Environmental Initiatives, Ecoaction, and Bankwatch. The topic of my speech is dedicated to sustainable renewable energy solutions for rebuilding Ukraine. First of all, I want to outline the main renewables given Ukraine's context. For Ukraine, it is feasible to use wind, solar, rivers, biomass, and geothermal energy of the earth. and environmentally safe are wind, solar, and geothermal energy of the Earth. Intensive development and construction of hydropower station leads to disruptions in ecosystem, and uncontrolled incineration of biomass considerably increases emissions of harmful gases. Therefore, they need a well-balanced approach. If we see the structure of renewables in Ukraine, we will see that more than 50% belongs to solar panels, then wind, and a very small share goes to hydro and bioenergy. This structure is more or less the same each year. Surely aggression of Russia has a very harmful effect. More than 14% of solar panels have been damaged. 1 gigawatt are on the occupied territory. Regarding wind energy, more than 1 gigawatt is also on the occupied territory. But renewables have a great potential of development in Ukraine, and this goal is taken into account in the plan by 2030, and the purpose is to increase the share of renewables by 2030 gradually. And this slide, we can see the list of main directives and regulations of the European Union regulating functioning of renewables sector. First of all, it is related to integration into European Union. The most important directive are Directive 2018 favoring the use of renewables and its updated version dated 2023. This directive had already been implemented in November, and the EU countries, which are EU members, received the timeline of 18 months to follow the requirements. Talking about Ukraine, the necessity of implementing such requirements is related to our obligation to decrease greenhouse gases emissions to 30 by 35% and integration into EU process. Colleagues mentioned investment projects today. There are such projects in Ukraine, especially private sector makes considerable contribution into wind power because it is pretty profitable. and naturally private business is acting, supported by the EBRD and other financial institutions. But these projects are being constructed but there are gaps in national law. Therefore, these projects are often implemented with considerable disruptions of standards, unfortunately. Therefore, alignment of our legislation in the sphere of renewables to the EU acquis is crucial. Formally, Ukraine is not a member of the EU, just a candidate. Formally, Ukraine has to implement the directive RED II. And we are at the level of about 60% now. We should accelerate alignment of our legislation. In August 2025, Ministry of Energy developed the respective draft law, and the task is to, well, they are on this slide. We didn't have a lot of time to analyze and study this draft law, but my colleagues from Ecoaction have prepared the list of remarks and comments and sent it to the ministry. Overall, I have systematized these remarks. So, what kinds of renewables? It is not clear. There is some inconsistency between the development of the network and the areas of accelerated development. We don't see a clear definition. And the approach to the procedure is not perfect, and the participation of communities also is not enough. Overall, there is a full exclusion of ecologically vulnerable territories. There is a trend that if the territory is not if this territory belongs to the Emerald network, therefore they shall be excluded from the list of potential area of construction of renewables stations. These recommendations will enable to follow the requirements of the directive RED III and will create the basis for activation investments into green energy on the basis of economic efficiency and social and environmental balance. Our next speaker is Ruslan Scherbakov, the president of the fund RcErBs. Ruslan is working with Gromadas and has an interesting initiative in partnership with international partners for small and medium enterprises in zero-emission industries. My issue is the most painful. Small and medium enterprises and how to fight with them. It's a joke, but everybody understands that small enterprises in eco industry are not a priority of economy. At the same time, they are the most important. And I will pay attention to the problems of small enterprises. The first problem is the war. The war doesn't allow these enterprises to develop. They should relocate, start from scratch. If you know what a small business is, sometimes it is impossible to start from zero. Lack of staff. Our economics feels that many high qualified people moved to other countries. Many people are at war. High qualified specialists are volunteering. Small enterprises need high qualified experts and feel the lack of them. Lack of funds is another issue, and urgent need in new approaches to development. On one side, but we can create lemonade from lemon. Therefore, our small enterprises, they transform and introduce new technologies, I think more than any other country even. There are systematic barriers for small and medium enterprises. First of all, high cost of new technologies to be introduced, problems with bank loans, because there are high requirements, lack of experts such as energy managers and ecologists. Small business doesn't have money to pay such experts. Therefore, it is very complicated to develop. Access to new technologies, circular economy, waste reuse, processing. It is also expensive, restricted. Sometimes small business can't invest money into that. And also rules of play from the state are not understandable and not clear. It is volatile, it is changing. I want to pay your attention that for small enterprises which are involved in organic and eco products, they have their own challenges. And for any business which tries to be competitive, the absence of carbon neutrality is a kind of barrier to introduce and sell products in the EU. At the same time, there is growing demand for organic products. Therefore, the enterprises which don't introduce green technologies, they will be not competitive in future. A lot of small enterprises understand that and gradually introduce renewables and understand that if you are not green, you will not have access to grants. What can be the solution? First of all, creating dedicated funds and grants which will compensate 100% of municipal energy funds, eco-safety strategies as a first step to green economy. Colleagues often ask me, where Gromada is here? We state that Gromadas are drivers of green business. Why? All our laws and reforms are coming from above and should push business. I see representatives of active Gromadas here. Andriy mentioned that many donors I will explain why.
that you will and first of all, what's necessary for small business? These are different mechanisms of finance. So communities may do it together with public banks, with state authorities to develop a mechanism how to draw attention over small and medium businesses, even very small businesses that can work with support of public authorities. So, in fact, community, as we believe, as people working with the communities, community is a driver of such projects and small projects, but these small projects will be the basis for green economy that will push eco business in Ukraine. First of all, is public support. Local leaders must be in the focus. There is necessary to develop trainings for public activists, maybe to provide budget support, but not very big, but it is quite motivated thing to attract young people, to attract experienced elderly people, which are not very active, but they can be attracted and they can be very pleased in working with you and supporting you. So we need to think about money, resources, financial resources, first of all, how to join grant programs, donors initiatives, and of course to seek international partners. I would like to say that one of our projects, this is Interregivsky project. We are working with the smaller businesses, and so the essence of this project that we should provide some recommendations and guidelines for the European Union and Ukraine, how to improve the situation for small business and to help them work in Ukraine. And 6 countries are included in this project, and they have their own projects. If you think that everything is so fine with the small business in Europe, but it's not so. So there are some problems as well. They would like to analyze these problems, so we have a good chance as we are proposed to join this program as a candidate country. So right now we are collecting all information about such enterprises, how they want to improve the environment, what do they want from the state, what legislative acts must be adopted, and what financial support they want, so they could be competitive not only in Ukraine but in Europe as well. So, and towards about activities of our communities. Also, students speak pro bloggers, and I speak about communities. Of course, this is the analysis of the community's demands. It's a public opinion, it's community opinion, it's the opinion of experts, this development of different strategies to be introduced and implemented by the communities, and of course international partners. And as the conclusion, I would like to say the following things. The most important thing I would like to emphasize unfortunately, most our communities, first of all, small communities, do not understand their own potential. They don't have qualified possibilities to do a breakthrough in the cooperation with the public society, the civil society. I would like to propose the local communities which don't know what to do, just to join some support program and that will improve your cooperation with a small business. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to ask if there are any questions. So, does anyone want to say something? I understand that we need to go for lunch, but if any questions, so please. I think that our speakers were trying to provide good recommendations and describe the situation. We do not pretend to cover all issues because it is impossible to do it for an hour and a half. I think that we need a lot of time, but I'm satisfied how it was going. We were trying to tell about what we are working on. I think that we had some common things, different speakers, different speeches, but I think that the common thing is that we were talking about the improvement of transparency, participation in all the process. So it's obligatory thing, and we are working on that. These standards are being developed; they already exist, and there is a legislation and EU process that will help us in this situation. So what we think that policy standards, guidelines may exist, but quite often people do not align with them. So we need to comply with these policies because the rules must be the same for everyone. And if we follow these rules, that is good. And evidence, all presentations show that we need to have evidence that there will be no negative impact from investments, but there will be positive effect. So as for the comments to Pippa's presentation, so this standard DNS is already envisaged in the Ukraine facility. It's not obligatory, but I think that we will continue to talk about it because it's very important for public investments, because there is methodology. And as for the feasibility task, so this screening tool is being introduced. Right now, it's like a kind of recommendations. Right now, we are thankful to the Green Transition Office for developing this standard. It's very young, of course, especially for Ukraine. So for those who will propose projects, in particular for communities, we have a lot of work to do. I hope that we will not end this session with negative notes. So last chance for questions. If no, let's go for a lunch. That's very important. Last words. I would like to say that Ukraine has joined Interreg. It's an international fund financing different programs, multinational European programs, including candidate countries. And we proposed this solution, and I think that's very interesting. So projects, about 20 projects in Ukraine, from public civil society organizations, and these projects are being implemented in Green Deal. And we propose for these long-term projects that have just launched to share information. So if we are working on something, so we can share this information for other colleagues. So we have already joined our efforts with other projects. So let's work with it. Our colleagues told us you're working on the zero net, and we are working on the SME, and we would like to propose to all 20 projects so we could communicate, you know, in order to expand our influence. That's all. If no questions, close the session. Thank you very much that you are with us.
Thank you to our online speakers. Have a good day.